Euromaxx highlights. And here's your host, Louise Houghton.
Hello and welcome to the show. Before we get going, let's show you a roundup of what we have in store over the next half an hour. Webmaster, French artist Sébastien Préchou gets tied up in art. In good taste, a German gourmet blog is making top restaurants take note. And conspiracy theory, does the German city of Bielefeld really exist? So it's time to celebrate for Ken Follett. The British author has reached a milestone and his most successful book to date is Eye of the Needle. It now appears in 30 languages, has won an Edgar Award and been made into a film. But this is just a small portion of his work.
Ken Follett is one of the most successful contemporary writers. His works, spanning a 35-year career, have sold some 130 million copies. Success is what he aimed for from the start.
I always wanted to be a star, right from a young age. And, you know, when I was very young, I didn't care what kind of star. I just wanted to be a star. You know, authors aren't supposed to say that. Authors are supposed to say I had a message to give the world, and it wasn't like that for me. It wasn't like that for me. I wanted to entertain people. I wanted them to love my stories.
Follett started out writing in London. While still a philosophy student, he reported for several daily newspapers.
When I was about 24, a colleague of mine on the newspaper I was working for wrote a thriller. And I kind of thought, well, if he can do it, maybe I can.
At first, he only wrote in his free time. But in 1974, he quit his day job. 4 years later, the espionage thriller Eye of the Needle, Die Nadel in German, brought Ken Follett international fame.
I was very pleased when Eye of the Needle became a big bestseller. I was already very fond of champagne, but I couldn't afford champagne very often. But once Eye of the Needle had been published, I could afford champagne every day. But the main thing on my mind then was, can I do it again?
4 more spy novels followed, all of them bestsellers. In 1989, Follett published his first historical novel, The Pillars of the Earth. It sold 18 million copies around the world, making it his most successful book.
One thing that's absolutely essential for a good popular novel, and that is that the reader becomes emotionally involved in the story. We have these characters, they're living their lives, they may be in danger, they may be in love, they may be full of hope or full of despair. The key factor is that as a reader you share their emotions.
The sequel, World Without End, was also a huge hit.
It holds your interest and you want to keep reading it to get to the end.
Once you have got it in your hand, you can't keep it off your hand.
He's written another one and I can't wait to read it.
Ken Follett plans to complete 3 more books by 2023. And one other great wish remains.
Well, it would be very nice if the movie or miniseries of one of my books won an Oscar. Now, there's a party I'd like to go to. I like the red carpet, evening dress, all the fabulous clothes. That, one time I would quite like to do that.
But before that, in September, the 3rd part of his century trilogy, Edge of Eternity, is due out.
Now, until now, I'd not made a connection between geometrics and spiders' webs. But when French artist Sébastien Préchou made a 3D version of one of his drawings, that is how it appeared to be. And this non-fictional Spider-Man is now casting his web around the world.
Works of string art as installations in natural settings like here in Florida or in a villa in Marrakesh. What looks like spiderwebs are actually Bézier curves and are the focus of 39-year-old Parisian artist Sébastien Préchou. Now, Sébastien Préchou has been regularly pulling the strings at an empty factory building in a Paris suburb. He experiments and tries out new techniques, line by line, for hours on end.
We live in an age of rapid technological progress. Everything's moving fast. You forget to take the proper time to do things right. People don't ask anymore where things come from or how something came about. But I'm going completely against the current. People ask me all the time, how did you ever find the time for it? Or how long did it take you?
One sculpture graces the shop of a major coffee maker on the Champs-Élysées. It took 10 days to arrange the 11 kilometers of string with the finest of precision.
Regularity is the most important thing for the optical effect. The strings have to be spaced every 2 centimeters. If not, the whole object seems to lose its structure.
Some of Sébastien Préchou's work has even found its way into museums, such as Paris's Palais de Tokyo Museum for Modern Art. He collaborated with graffiti artists on this work using elastic neon-colored string.
We didn't have much room here. We painted everything black and worked with blacklight to bring out the neon effect. It creates a play on perspective and volume. So you can't really define the space optically. I'm out to throw the viewer a little off balance here.
When Sébastien Préchou works out in the open, he has to be especially careful. Here he's interconnected a Paris railway bridge with string. His biggest challenge so far, he says, was this creation in Rio de Janeiro's botanical garden.
We had to deal with the climate as well as the local wildlife. The red ants, the black snakes that you have to watch out for, and the monkeys that pelted us with fruit. There were all sorts of things we had to watch out for.
Back to Préchou's current project. It took 3 hours to thread 1,000 meters of string into this shape.
What drives me is the moment I realize an idea. I'm not interested in what comes after that. I have no emotional bond with my works. Something's completed, I like it, now I've learned something, and I'm off to something new.
And something easily undone. In no time at all, Préchou's art is just a batch of string again.
Michelin stars and Gourmet ratings are the most recognised way to grade restaurants. But people are also taking note of public reviews and blogs before booking a table. There is one German portal called Sternfresser that gets over 80,000 views a month. And we join the bloggers at yet another nice evening out on the job.
Sternfresser literally means star gobblers. And they're not just foodies, they're men on a mission. They dine and post a review on their website. There are no formal ratings. What they do dish out are lengthy descriptions, complete with pictures.
We don't take ourselves as seriously as regular restaurant critics do. We want our reviews to be lighthearted, and we want to focus on how enjoyable the meals are.
Today we're paying a visit to the Schloss Hotel Lehrbach near Cologne. The restaurant boasts 2 Michelin stars, and the palatial surroundings don't hurt either. The testers usually announce that they're coming. Only one of the 4 food buffs actually does this full-time. They normally come in pairs to get 2 different perspectives. Their first impressions are not all that convincing.
It's a little on the sweet side, and it's stuck to my molars.
And apparently the proportions aren't quite perfect. But as they admit themselves, at this level of gourmet dining, the complaints are nothing more than a quibble.
When we're traveling abroad in a major city like Paris or London, we might take in 8 restaurants in just 4 days. That's all we have time for. It's hard work, because you have to take a very professional approach. But here in Germany, we usually do 2 or 3 restaurants a week.
For chefs, the website isn't just where they're judged and measured. The pros read it for information too. It gets around 80,000 views a month. Chef Niels Henkel wants to know what's being said about his restaurant. And that's not all.
I check the site at least once a week for the latest news. There's a lot of information there that's really interesting for people in the industry too, like me. And I can't be expected to know everything on my own. They're very well connected, and they're well informed too. So it's good to log on and check out what they have to say.
The La Mer restaurant on the North Sea island of Sylt is run by Sebastian Zier. He agrees the blog is essential reading.
It's simply a new, fresh and modern medium that reaches people who don't have much interest in Michelin or Gourmillon.
The photos are key to the online presentations. They're taken at the table, not in the kitchen. It's like a visual appetizer that lets the diners know what awaits them.
Of course, we don't like to give away too much. Our reports take a couple of weeks to finish and go online. By then, the menu will have changed. If a guest goes to a top restaurant looking for a specific dish, they'll probably find a completely different selection.
And they find that this unpretentious culinary creation goes down a treat.
Das ist das Gegenteil von einem Streberteller, von so einem überladenen Streberteller.
We're fans of gourmet eating, so there's always excitement and anticipation. But we're also very critical, perhaps even more focused on detail than some conventional critics.
The bloggers evaluate the complete package: food, staff and service. And now for the grand finale at the Schloss Hotel Leerbach. The final verdict after their 10-course meal: delicious.
Now, Terminal 2 at London's Heathrow was the original airport entrance opened by the Queen in 1955. As part of its recent renovations, sculptor Richard Wilson was commissioned to make something special for the entrance hall. The result is a giant twisted aluminium sculpture that depicts the imaginary flight path of a tumbling stunt plane.
77 tons of aluminum are suspended up to 18 metres high in the entry hall of the new Terminal 2 at London's Heathrow Airport. At a 78-metre wingspan, Slipstream is the longest sculpture in Europe. It's the creation of 61-year-old British sculptor Richard Wilson.
Imagine filling this terminal space full of clay. Then you pick up an aeroplane and you launch it through there, so it spirals and tumbles and flies and dives and twists. Through that clay, it's carving a hole right the way through that clay and goes out the other side. You then pick the building up, you turn it that way, and you fill that hole with plaster, fast-setting plaster, and then you excavate all the clay away. That plaster form is of a movement from A to B, which is what the passenger is doing, it's what a journey is all about. It's also, in a sense, capturing the moments of flight and velocity and speed and endeavour.
Wilson compares building Slipstream to conducting an orchestra. It would only work as a group effort. He had to employ a team of engineers and IT specialists for years to ensure the work's stability and safety. Slipstream was transported in 23 components and assembled inside Terminal 2.
It was almost like building an aeroplane. We were at the real cutting edge of the technology available to us in order to make this. You could not have made that 5 years ago. The programs didn't exist, and I find that fascinating that in that 5 years, I mean, we started 4 years ago, we were picking up stuff where it was still clunky material because it hadn't really been perfected, but it was stuff that we were taking from the aero industry. We were borrowing it from the aero industry, and they were telling us how to use it. So the engineers were then adapting it for a sculpture that was mimicking something of velocity and flight.
Richard Wilson numbers among Britain's most prominent contemporary sculptors. He was twice nominated for the Turner Prize, honoring British visual artists. His pieces are large, often spectacular explorations of space. As is this work for the Olympic Games in London. Or this one for the Liverpool Biennial. London's renowned Saatchi Gallery exhibits one of his most significant works, 2050, a sculpture made of motor oil. It's the museum's only permanent installation.
I don't go near architecture other than as a sculptor to tamper with it and to borrow from architecture, and the fact that I play with the void of space, architectural space, that happens to be my material. Some artists will construct out of materials that are gone and bought in the shop. I will construct and make or undo using the space of architecture as the material that, you know, a sculptor to play with.
5 internationally known artists were approached to do the piece for the entry hall. Wilson's proposal was ultimately chosen. Slipstream has cost more than €3 million.
This is a public space, it's an airport. Granted, these aren't people necessarily making a pilgrimage to come and look at a sculpture, but 20 million people will be passing through this terminal. And I'm hoping everyone in some way will engage, because they can't avoid seeing it. And as we saw with our passengers who were testing the airport just now, everyone's doing that first kind of, wow, what's that click? Send it off somewhere else. The pictures of this are flying around the world right at this minute as they are tweeted. I find that kind of interesting.
Richard Wilson's jumbo sculpture may soon become Heathrow's new figurehead, not only as Europe's biggest work of art, but also its most widely seen.
And the Queen will officially open the new terminal on the 23rd of June. Now, the Pilatus Railway in Switzerland is the steepest cog railway in the world. It leads from Lake Lucerne up to the top of Mount Pilatus, and this year marks the railway's 125th birthday.
Back in the late 19th century, the idea of ascending Mount Pilatus by rail seemed nothing but a dream. But the Pilatus Railway shows that dreams can become reality. It's the world's steepest cogwheel railway, built 125 years ago.
This is amazing. It's just so steep.
I trust these trains. I'm not too nervous about that. Just a little bit exciting.
The narrow gauge railway can handle inclines of up to a gradient of 48%, chugging up a 1,600-metre slope in just half an hour. Steering the railway is fairly simple, but the engine driver still has a tough job.
Maintaining concentration is a challenge, but you need to in case there's an animal on the tracks or something like that. Plus a 1,600-meter slope 5 or 6 times a day, that's hard work.
Back before the railway was built, there was already a hotel at the peak. It had about 3,000 guests each year, but they wanted more. That's when Edward Locher came up with the bold idea of a railway. To do that, the engineer devised a new system. A rack, or symmetrical bar, with its horizontal pinions, is engaged by 2 cogwheels that drive the locomotive and keep it from jumping off the track. Building it all was also a challenge. Many tons of material were hauled up the slope. Tunnels were excavated, but in just 400 days, the work was completed. The steam-powered railway made its first trip in June 1889. Soon, the number of visitors to the Pilatus soared.
First, you needed a lot of coal for the fire, and then the water had to be topped up along the way. So they had several stops to refill. It all took about an hour and a half, at about 4 kilometers an hour.
The line was converted to electricity in 1937. That was a worthwhile investment because it cut the travel time in half. By then, they had about 100,000 passengers a year. The same rail cars are still in use today, bringing passengers onto the top of the Pilatus and back down to Lake Lucerne. Meanwhile, the railway moves about 350,000 people a year, but it goes into hibernation in late fall.
When the weather's bad and it starts to get cold, the overhead lies can ice up. And then it's a real battle to make the climb, because you get intermittent power outages. And then because the slope is so steep, the rail car goes another 2 meters at most, and then it stops.
The original cogwheels are still in operation too. The entire system is checked carefully at the depot every day. There's not all that much wear and tear though, because Locher didn't skimp on material for his design. He was a forward-looking man in all sorts of ways.
We know the entire system cost just under 2 million originally. They stayed on budget too, which you can't take for granted nowadays. They kept the construction on budget and they stuck to their schedule. It's all pretty amazing, really.
But the new Locher system never caught on. Not long after it went into operation, cable railways took over. They were easier and cheaper to build. Still, even today, the Pilatus Railway is a marvel of engineering.
Now, to finish the show, we ask the question, does the German city of Bielefeld really exist? It is apparently a city in the west of Germany, but there's a conspiracy theory that's been running for years that states all is not quite as it seems.
About 300,000 people supposedly live in Bielefeld. Officially, that makes it Germany's 18th largest city. But there are those in Germany who question its very existence, including plenty of Berliners.
Bielefeld doesn't exist.
A city nobody knows or knows about it but not where?
Bielefeld?
There's nothing there, is there? Bielefeld? Nothing. Nada.
Bielefeld? What's that then?
The Bielefeld conspiracy.
A conspiracy in which signposts, transport listings, car registration plates, and so on are all forged by the Secret Service or by alien beings in order to simulate a non-existent city. It started 20 years ago as a joke among students. But now an online search for Bielefeld gibt es nicht or Bielefeld doesn't exist will turn up about 12,000 entries. What definitely does exist, however, is a wealth of literature on the city. One such book is by Thomas Walden.
As far as its public image goes, Bielefeld really is a city that doesn't quite exist. It doesn't stand out much. At first glance, you wouldn't think of it as an important city, not at all.
Thomas Walden also wrote the script for the film The Bielefeld Conspiracy. It sees 4 residents fighting secret forces to secure the existence of their disputed city. It was shot on location at the Sparrenberg Castle. The medieval building is a city landmark. But wrapped in scaffolding, it does lend the conspiracy theory a certain degree of plausibility. Journalist Oliver Geier is a Bielefeld native who lives in Berlin, and he's no stranger to such accusations.
It's like a blank slate, a space onto which people can project whatever they want, including the Bielefeld conspiracy. Nobody knows the city, so you can say whatever you want about it, and people believe it and laugh themselves silly.
Poor Bielefeld. It's a city that gets no respect. Even the university building is often called an extraterrestrial spaceship rather than a place of higher learning.
Everyone used to be bothered that they didn't live in Munich or Hamburg, and everyone talked about how great it is in the big cities. They wanted to make up for that sense of inferiority by going to really great bars with that big city feeling. They liked to show visitors those great neon advertising billboards because they reminded them a bit of Piccadilly Circus.
Meanwhile, the people of Bielefeld will be celebrating the 800th birthday of their city all year. even if their trademark castle isn't dressed for the occasion.
Well, now we've got all that cleared up, it's time to say goodbye. Thanks for being with us and see you again next time. Bye-bye for now.